Hey everybody, and welcome back to Rich Emotions RMTV. I am your host, Dana Paul. This week we have a really exciting show for you. As always, our very own Jamie will give us updates on everything happening in the world of esports and varsity. Our guest this week is Lydia Pendergrass, and she is the managing editor of Hot Spawn, which is an online publication. Hey Lydia, how's it going today?
Hey Dana, thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing well, surviving. We're living through this crazy times of this pandemic.
Right, doing what we can.
Absolutely. So Lydia, I love just to start off, if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and all that fun stuff.
Sure. Well, like you said, I'm the managing editor of hotspawn.com. Like you said, we're an esports publication. We cover all of the major esports in the scene right now, everything that's going on news related, interviews, features. We're also digging really hard into guides right now. So if there's a game you want to know how to play, or a certain character, hero, or agent on a game that you're interested in, make sure you check that out to see how to play it with tips and tricks and everything. I've been with Hotspawn since, January of this year, so before coronavirus craziness all happened. I am the managing editor, so basically what that means is I manage all of the writers, I edit everything before it's published on the site. I basically manage all of the content that goes on the site. So everything comes through me, from pitches to editing to publication to social media. Also involved in a lot of kind of big term discussions for content strategies that we have going on in the future. Esports is ever evolving, and so are we. So getting a lot of stuff planned for the future. Personally, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been married for a little over a year. I have a son that's about to turn a year in 1-year-old in a couple of weeks now. And, coronavirus stuff hasn't really fazed me too much. I'm used to working from home. I've been doing it for a number of years now. So it's just been a little bit of an adjustment for us.
So that was a lot of information. So I want to get back to, I know a lot of our community is going to ask, what is your favorite hot spot in Nashville?
Oh, that's tough. My husband and I are both really big hockey fans. And so the only time that we go downtown is for hockey games. So I love going to hockey games and just being in the atmosphere of hockey games. So going to Bridgestone Arena downtown is one of my favorite spots just because of hockey. Casually, there's a cidery called Diskin Cider. And especially during the spring and summer months when cider is really popular, that's probably one of my favorite spots to go to if I had to choose.
Yeah. I've not gone to the cider place, but I've spent a lot of time on the main strip there. But that's a whole other side show that we could talk about. What I am curious though, and I know the community would be too, is so how long have you been involved in esports, and how did you get involved? We always like kind of hearing those stories of how people really just got involved in esports.
Yeah, so my background is in journalism. I got a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism in 2011. And then after that, I worked in traditional media for 7 years, something like that. I worked in local TV. I worked in TV media for 7 years as a technical director. So I worked behind the scenes a lot. The last maybe 3 or 4 years that I was working in TV, I was kind of starting to realize that it wasn't really my thing. I knew I didn't want to do it for the rest of my life. I knew I didn't want to be in that industry for forever. It just wasn't my vibe. So right about that time was when I really started getting more and more into gaming and esports. And, my husband got really into Dota, and the game, and then he kind of discovered the esports side of it. And that kind of got me into it a lot, watching and playing with him. So I kind of realized, what if I take something that I am classically trained in journalism, and try to apply it to something that I'm really interested in as a hobby, esports and gaming. So at the time, my game of choice was Heroes of the Storm. So I started volunteering for various publications at the time, writing, doing social media, covering tournaments, doing any kind of odd stuff like that, to just kind of get my foot in the door. And at the time, 5 or so years ago, media people weren't really getting paid for it. It wasn't their job to work in esports media at that time. So it wasn't very far-fetched to basically volunteer and have a full-time job on the side, basically. So yeah, I did that for a year or so, and that kind of progressively evolved into more freelance opportunities, more jobs, more contracts. And I was able to get to the point where I could transfer from working in traditional media and mainstream media, if you will, to move over into esports and gaming media. That opened up opportunities for me to do other stuff in the industry. Like, I've done some influencer relations for startups. I've worked in merchandise. I've advised. I've done like kind of a plethora of things, just being generally involved in the industry. And then that kind of worked my way up to the point to now be the managing editor of a publication.
That's pretty awesome. So that leads me to, really, I'd love to know, what is kind of a day in a life for you as the managing editor of Hotspawn?
Yeah, so esports is global, as we all know. So by the time that I get up in the morning at like 7 o'clock in the morning, there's probably already been news to happen overnight while I'm asleep. And like I said, I have a 1-year-old son, and so balancing like working from home and also essentially being a stay-at-home mom. Now my husband works in healthcare, so he's actually going to work every day now. So usually after I get like myself and my son kind of settled in the morning, it's catching up on what has happened overnight, and making sure those are the top priorities of news to get out for the day. Editing, collaborating with my writers to see what's going on, what needs to be covered, what we need to jump on right now, what needs to be an immediate concern to discuss. Once we kind of catch up on news, then it's generally going over any type of feature content that we're working on, long-term, long-form things like interviews, features, guides, anything like that. That is something that I can, that is kind of second priority. Anything long-term that I need, any long-term content that I need to be working on or editing, especially interviews. And then, past that, it's a lot of discussions with my superiors on what our content strategies are. We have a lot of different ideas that are coming about, that will hopefully come to fruition soon. We work with different organizations and different companies for content partnerships, so discussing how we need to be executing those properly. So like I said, kind of a lot of back and forth with my boss and our marketing team on what do we need to execute this week, how do we need to put these plans into process and stuff like that. And then also keeping on top of everything news related, any breaking news, anything that's going on that needs to be published immediately. And then also juggling a 1-year-old toddler at the same time.
You definitely seem to have the work-life balance thing going on for you, the yin and yang. Earlier you mentioned, which I found really interesting, that one of the things Hotspawn does is has these guides and tips and tricks. So what would you say, recently the most popular like tips and tricks folks are looking for?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that it's Valorant right now. It's been in closed beta for I think it's been somewhere around 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks now, and then it's getting full release next week. Yeah, next week. So people that were able to score closed beta access are really interested in how they can have the leg up on everyone else, especially when the game is on full release next week and when basically the floodgates open. So, of course, Valorant has been really, really, really popular lately.
And what have you been hearing? So it's interesting because a lot of our folks at Ritual Motion were part of that beta, so they've been able to play. The community has been, we've been chatting with some folks in our community. What have you been hearing overall about the game itself and what people are saying to you and to Hotspawn?
I think you really can't look at it with fresh eyes because everyone is obviously comparing it as a Counter-Strike and an Overwatch. If the two games had a baby, it would be Valorant, right? So I think it's hard to look at it and not compare it to those two games. On a Looking at it from a pure game perspective and game development, it feels fairly balanced, but that's just because it is in its early stages and there aren't that many agents available to play right now. So because it is in a somewhat of a smaller capacity, it is easier to balance from a gaming perspective. So, there are maybe one or two that probably feel overpowered in the wrong hands. But in general, it feels fairly like a fairly balanced game. And then I think it's all just really going to come. It's all just really going to come out when the esports side of it finally comes to fruition. Riot is opting to have it basically run by third-party tournament organizers. So people are investing a lot into it right now before it's even on full release. We saw the exact same thing happen with Overwatch, and even after 3 years of the Overwatch League, it's taking a drastic decline. So from my eyes, I would be a little bit worried about it, but obviously people that have money have faith in it right now.
Yeah, it is interesting, and you brought up Overwatch also. What's kind of happened in the past few years with that model of buying into leagues and whatnot. What I would really like, and I think the community would really love to know, we're so about inclusion and how important that is in this industry, especially. So what advice would you give other female professional gamers, on how to get into the industry and maybe what are some of the kind of lessons you've learned about breaking into the industry?
I think as a female and as a minority in general, I think you really, really have to have a thick skin when you get into an industry like this. It's funny because gaming in general is such a niche industry that gamers have felt like their whole lives like they are the outcasts and they are the nerds and everything, and they get into gaming because they feel like they can be included. But if you're a minority, you then go into this and it's very hard. The inclusivity issue is still very prominent right now, especially in 2020 right now. So it's very, you really have to go into it with a thick skin. And I think it sounds really cliche, but I think all I can say is to not give up if it's truly your passion, that there will be opportunities for you. With women in the industry as competitors, there are female only tournaments and female only teams, and some people may think that those are hypocritical for inclusivity, but right now that's really the best thing that they have right now. It's kind of their greatest option to compete and to be competitors. So while it's kind of like a band-aid on a situation, and hopefully we won't need teams in tournaments like that in the next 5 to 10 years, but for women and minorities that are interested, I think all I can say is to really hold strong and to not give up. And there are opportunities out there. There are some companies that are clearly discriminatory, but there are also amazing companies out there and teams and organizations that are not. So, I've had experience with both. I've had experience with both. So I can say that it does get better as long as you work hard and as long as you have hard work ethic to put into it, and as long as you really be steadfast about something if you're so passionate about it.
That's awesome. I think that's really great advice for our community and as a whole. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Appreciate you taking the time today. As always, if anyone wants to check out Hot Spawn, their website is right below. You can check it out. They have really great content. If you want to see guides, up to news, updates on anything, it's definitely worth checking out. Lydia, thank you again for your time today, and looking forward to reconnecting.
Thank you so much, Dane. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. Well, I want to thank Lydia again with Hot Spawn. That was an awesome interview. Jamie, I know you're a big fan of Hot Spawn. You've gone on their website a bunch of times, right?
Absolutely. I was just on recently for Call of Duty. They had the Mosh Pit mode Aisle 9, and Hot Spawn had a great article on how to play Aisle 9. So it helped me with my in-game strategies.
All right, and Jamie, I'm really excited about this week's update with you because I know you have some things going on with Call of Duty in Vegas, which is really interesting. And I know we're also talking about inclusion in esports, especially with female gamers. So why don't we just get right into it? And like, what is going on with Call of Duty in Vegas?
So it's pretty interesting. The Call of Duty League is actually allowing betting. Vegas has allowed it to be. It was approved by Vegas, so you can now bet on the Call of Duty League. This will be offered as a test run and will run through the rest of 2020, and it will be placed alongside other games that have already been allowed to be bet on, which is CSGO, League of Legends, iRacing, and Overwatch.
So, like with Vegas, I mean, Vegas is crazy, right? You can bet on anything and everything. Are they, with say Call of Duty, are they going to bet on number of kills, number of snipes? Like, did someone use like a Hellfire missile? Like, how detailed is the betting going to get, with the games?
So it being a test run, they're going to start by basically you can pick your team and who you want to win, and then you can guess to try to get as close to how many kills your favorite player may get. But they're hoping that with like you said, you can bet on anything in Vegas. They're hoping to get to the point where you can be like, oh well, I bet that this person's going to use the Hellfire missile, or this person's going to have 17 snipes, and really start doing like the little side bets on top of the who's going to win kind of bet.
Well, that's going to be it's going to be interesting, Jamie, to see how this thing all plays out, especially with traditional sports and where things are going right now. And there's a lot of unknowns. It would be really interesting to see how Vegas embraces and how the gamblers are going to embrace the betting on these esports.
I agree. It's going to be very interesting. But we're going to switch on into the inclusion of women in esports. It's a topic that we talk about all the time, which is really cool. There's a British Women's Esports Association called Women in Esports, and they're campaigning to get more inclusive with the side of esports and in the world of esports and trying to make a name for themselves.
That's really awesome. We talk about this all the time. The great thing about esports is a complete level playing field. It's not how fast you run. It doesn't matter how much you lift. It's all about mental strategy. So I love hearing more and more about inclusion. What other news you have going on about that?
Genji Esports, an all-women's Fortnite team, is actually being sponsored by Bumble, which is a huge sponsorship for them. And their uniforms, the colors, the sponsorship are really cool. So if you haven't had a chance to check them out, I say definitely check out those uniforms.
That's great. And if we can, we'll try to get an image of those uniforms up on RMTV so folks can take a look at it.
Awesome. And last but not least, the Dignitas. We talked about them a few weeks ago. They're the CSGO reigning champions in that competition. They're starting Valorant and Fortnite. They don't want the stigma or the label gamer girls or girl gamers to be stuck with female gamers. And I couldn't agree more with that. I think that there's no room for a term like that. You're either a gamer or you're not, and everyone can be a gamer. So I'm in agreement with that. And I think, I don't know how you feel about it, Dana.
Well, there is no he, she. You're right. We're all gamers, right? So I think we have to start being more mindful of that. And I'm just excited to see more and more esports in general go across borders, go globally. So it's really exciting.
I agree. I think, like we've both touched upon and we talk about all the time, gaming's for everyone and everyone should be involved. But
absolutely.
That's all I have for the esports update this week.
Well, Jamie, as always, thank you so much. I also want to thank our community for tuning in this week. And our thanks to you is, once again, the Thank You 2020 code that you can use for anything on our website. That's our little way of saying thank you and for being part of our community. And more importantly, letting us be part of your community. Everyone, be well and peace.